What happens when we create artificial minds that are as or more intelligent than we are? What are the possible timelines, implications, and ways forward to ensure we create the most positive future for our world? This is the AGI show, and I'm your host, Sarush Paul. In this episode sequence on the implications and responses to a world with AGI, we speak with Professor Richard Dazeley. Professor Dazeley is the Deputy Head of School at the School of Information Technology at Deakin University in Melbourne, Australia. He's also a senior member of the International AI Existential Safety Community of the Future of Life Institute. His research at Deakin University focuses on aligning AI systems with human preferences, a field better known as AI alignment. So today we'll learn a little bit more about his thoughts on where AGI is headed, what it might mean for our world when it does arrive, and how we can best respond as a world to ensure it's going to be a safe and positive future for the world and for humanity. We'll learn also a little bit more about his research and how he might be part of that solution. Welcome, Richard, to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So we'll just start off, Richard. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
So I'm a professor of AI machine learning. I've been at Deakin now for the last little bit over 5 years. Previously to that, I was at Federation University, also in Victoria. I've been researching, AI in general since my PhD time. So firstly, back in the early 2000s, working in symbolic AI, and then in about 2007, switching my focus a little bit more towards machine learning, where most of my research has been since. About 5 years ago when I started at Deakin, I also switched from sort of fundamental research to much more around the alignment area of machine learning. So trying to design systems or learning algorithms that can adapt to human needs, if you like, to human society, rather than just learning optimal results.
Fantastic. And that's exactly why we're excited to speak with you today. And it is a big area, so excited to kind of dig more into it. So, Richard, just to set kind of groundwork a little bit, when we talk about artificial general intelligence, so something that can be comparable to a human across most tasks, do you think that's something that we'll someday have? And is it, and kind of when do you see that sort of world coming to fruition?
Look, I think it's a very interesting question and a very interesting time to be asking this. And I think one of the problems is we still haven't actually answered the question of what is intelligence, either in humans or animals. It's not something we clearly understand what it is, to then turn around to say that we can develop in an artificial sense. We kind of need to know what it is we're trying to develop in that sense. So it's a difficult question to answer. So one interesting thing, if you look at AI history, right back in 1957, they originally came out and Minsky and various people came out and said, 10 years we'll have AI human intelligence. And of course, 10 years later, we obviously didn't. But one of the things that is interesting, that I always found interesting, is that after 10 years, while they hadn't invented human level intelligence, they had invented the stuff that they said they were going to invent 10 years earlier. It's just that once they invented it, everybody realized, hang on, being able to win at a game of checkers isn't actually human level intelligence. And so we've had moving goalposts for a very long time in this sense. And I still don't think we've really nailed down what it is we're trying to do. Add to that, there's also a lot of, I guess, a little bit confusing talk around things like superintelligence and other things. For me, I think one of the difficulties is that AI is not trying to create, in my view, human level intelligence, or even to mimic human intelligence. We're really developing a different form of intelligence, which is this artificial intelligence. So when we say superintelligence, that is, or AGI that is like human intelligence, I don't think we're ever going to develop something that is like human intelligence. We're going to develop something that, in some senses, you could say is beyond human intelligence, but that's because it's operating on a different environment to human intelligence. So humans operate in a individual sense. So I learn what I need to learn to live my life. I take from the outside world the type of information that I need to be able to live my life. Now, whether or not that's a political ideology or a religious view or whatever that is, I've taken from society an understanding, my own understanding, based on uh, the views that I form around that. But it's a personal experience. So there's nothing I can do, for instance, as an individual to be able to understand the emotions and intentions of everybody around me, even the people that I can't see. So for a whole city. But an AI can, because an AI is operating in an environment where it's perceiving, potentially, if this is the purpose of the AI
Right.
to perceive an entire city of people. And so the type of decisions it makes are going to be a decision based on all of society. It's not basing it on my own individual viewpoint. So I guess the point I'm making is that the intelligence is different to human intelligence. It's operating, it's solving a different question. It's being intelligent about a different thing to what people are intelligent about. Does that make it super intelligent? In my view, no, because it's not actually it's doing something completely different to what I would ever ask a person to do. But it does give the appearance, I guess, to society of being in some way super, because it's operating at a societal level potentially, rather than operating at a personal individual level. Can AGI operate in that individual way the same as a person? I don't accept that we're going to necessarily have anything that operates like a person. And I don't really think there's really that many people trying to do that in that same sense. They're trying to create something that is applicable across large numbers of people and solves different types of problems.
Yeah.
So it's a complicated answer in the sense that the simple question that you keep asking, or not you, but people ask, is will we have human intelligence created by people? And I don't accept that that's even what we're trying to create anymore. It may have been at the start, but I think the field has moved on, and what we're creating are these more general societal level intelligence.
Yep.
Now, whether or not
Yeah.
people want to accept that is a very different question. I think that'll be difficult for society to accept some of those methods.
So I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense, and I think it is a useful kind of move away from some of the same questions that you hear again and again. And I think you're entirely right. If you look at the machine learning community, if you look at the top practitioners and developers of artificial intelligence, most of them are not trying to create some replica of a human. They're trying to solve specific tasks or problems or achieve very specific capabilities. So I think that makes a lot of sense. I guess sometimes when people are generally talking about this kind of the general intelligence concept, they are talking about a single system or like a connected system that can solve a very wide range of tasks. And I guess the question they are asking is, could that wide range of tasks someday look like it covers all or almost all of what human beings can achieve today in terms of tasks, and then to what degree of efficiency or capability. So could they do just the most basic things, or could they do almost everything we can do and more? So
Yeah.
do you imagine that even with just the intent the kind of the intent and aims of the current ML community, we could get to a point where a single artificial system or a connected set of systems could do the breadth and depth of the things that human beings could do.
Yeah, sure. So, look, the vast majority of AI systems that you hear about now are solving a single problem. Whether or not it's how to play Go or chess or respond to a textual question with some textual answers. They tend to be solving a particular problem. Now, there certainly are more general solutions that they're trying to be able to develop to operate across multiple areas. But there's really two ways of doing AGI in that general sense. The first way is to develop a large number of separate AIs that can do individual tasks and do them really well, whether or not that's give a text answer or draw a picture or whatever it is. And then have some sort of overarching algorithm or AI that, given what you've asked, is capable of choosing the correct AI to answer that. So a hierarchical approach to AI where you've got this overarching one that just knows how to choose the right AI to answer the question, or how to break the problem up into parts and ask them to different AIs and that sort of thing. So that's one way. The other way is a single AI system that is trained in a way that it can do all of the different tasks, take all of the necessary inputs and work out for itself how to respond without having to ask subsystems. There's problems I see with both approaches. The second approach, where it's simply a very hard problem. Let's go to the first approach. The first approach, where you're looking at these individual things. One of the problems I see with that is you've kind of siloed intelligence. So you'll have something that's good at responding at text. You've got something that's good at drawing a picture. You've got something good at writing music. You've got something that's good at solving a maths problem, whatever the different things are. So you've siloed the intelligence areas. But that doesn't necessarily solve the full AGI problem, because there'll always be gaps between those silos. There's infinite different things that we need to show intelligence over, and we can't necessarily have a silo for each one of those. So how do you address something that falls into the gaps between these silos? Now, personally, I think that this type of what I call an integrated intelligence, so we're integrating different AIs, I actually think this is the most likely one that we're going to get. In fact, it's the one that's most actively being developed by big corporations. And it will no doubt start out as integrating 3 or 4 different systems, and then they'll add more systems as they develop them. But it will always have the problem that it can solve very specific things, and the grey areas in between, if it needs some knowledge from those grey areas in between, it will get wrong, or there's a potential that it'll get wrong because it's had to guess from the 2 silos next to it. And so is that AGI? That's probably the one that's most likely to occur, and it will be very powerful, no doubt, providing you don't ask for something that sort of sits between these silos, and providing the AI deciding which one to ask is able to choose the right one and construct them in the right way. The other one of trying to train it in a more general sense, I think that's probably a lot further behind. It's a much more difficult task. Once you start to generalize across a large number of areas, you in all of AI, whenever you try and generalize, you can only do that by not being as smart in any specific area. So I can always train an agent to be really good at classifying the difference between a cat and a dog. But the moment you try and train it to be able to classify across a much larger range of things, its ability to tell the difference between cat and dog goes down. So it actually gets worse when you try and broaden how much it goes across. Will that ever be broad enough to be human level across those areas? Maybe, well, quite possibly eventually, but certainly not in the near future. I think we're a long way off
Right.
on that one.
Right. We have the proof of concept of the human brain being pretty well able to generalize across quite a lot of tasks, but whether we're close to that is a separate question.
Yeah. And I think we're a long way away from that. The integrated one with silos of intelligence, I think we're much closer to getting that, in the sense that that's a manageable problem because we can train systems to deal with individual components. And it will just be a matter of adding more components to that over time, and it will get more sophisticated the more we add more components. But I'm not sure that will fully be the AGI problem either.
Well, yeah, and that first one, I mean, in many ways, we're well on that journey, right?
Yeah.
You know, when you type into Google search, you're tapping into, I don't know how many dozens of subsystems at this point, with plenty of, neural nets and all kinds of other ML techniques underneath there. So we're already kind of going down that route, as is with a lot of products.
Yes. Yeah. We're well down that route. We've already got a number of the individual intelligences that can be integrated. And I know that OpenAI have said that they're looking at this integrated approach. And so there's no doubt that that's coming. There's no doubt that that's coming in the next 2 or 3 years. So I would not expect that to be far away. It's just how many intelligent integrated components they're going to have when they initially release, and they'll keep adding new ones as they go.
Absolutely. It seems to me also that the most likely and interesting scenarios are potentially the hybrid of these two things that you've just described, in the sense that, I mean, if you look at, it's very hard to move away from humans just because humans are the proof of concept of a capable general intelligence. And we are both, right? And we have this ability to generalize across tasks. And if you put a human alone in a room and gave them different tasks, they could do somewhat well on them. But really, our true capabilities start to shine when you provide us with additional tools, like a calculator and a word processor and a pen and all these things. And then above and beyond that, we also specialize individually and then work in teams and societies and larger groups where the highly specialized, general intelligences then work together to achieve even bigger capabilities and outcomes. So it feels like, and I'm curious of your take on this, that the hybrid world where we have some level of generalizable intelligence attached to tools, attached to other generalized intelligences, is where we'll get some of the biggest capabilities in the artificial world as well.
Yeah, I think so. And this sort of comes down to, I'm actually not sure we're actually trying to create human level intelligence. What we're trying to create is a set of tools or an intelligence that's capable of dealing with the components that I guess people wanted to deal with, to best integrate with helping us in our society. I mean, watching tens of thousands of security cameras is not something you'd ever ask a person to do. But it's something we can ask an AI to do, and it will do it well. And that doesn't make it more intelligent. It just means it's got a lot more processing power to be able to operate across a number of input spaces. And that sort of goes back to, I don't think we're trying to create the same intelligence as human intelligence. And then similarly with the Turing test, and the Turing test, which of course was a test to see whether or not something is of human level intelligence, I find that to be a rather ludicrous test. So for instance, if an alien came to Earth from outer space and built a spaceship, they came here, they came down here, and we decided to give them a Turing test to be able to test whether or not they are intelligent, we'd determine that they weren't, because we'd be able to tell them from a human. They wouldn't seem like a human. But that doesn't mean that they're not intelligent. They're obviously intelligent. They built a spaceship and came here. So the Turing test is not a test of intelligence. It's a test of human-like intelligence. And that's not necessarily what we're trying to create with AI. So we can create an intelligence. It's just not going to be the same. It'll have different purposes and different reasons for doing what it needs to do. Of course, I guess one of the things you sometimes hear from various taxi driving trips that you have, and they always, you tell them an AI person, they tend to raise it. They're going to take over the world, or that sort of thing. And I don't know if I'm jumping ahead on your questions, but
I was going to ask something on this point, but you go, please share what you're going to share.
So, I mean, you often get the question, is AI going to take over the world? Is AGI a risk? And there certainly is a lot of talk at the moment around the existential risk of AI. And there certainly are risks in how AI is used. I don't see any risk particularly in the AI itself, because unless it's just simply implemented or released badly. So I think there is some risks in how it's released and what systems we give things access to. But there's no reason, there's no desire on the part of AI to harm anything in particular, unless that's built into the system. So I don't know why anybody would be building it into the system. So, I've sidetracked anyway.
No. It's exactly what I was going to tap into next. Was it is the kind of a bit of the fork in the road for a lot of the people thinking about things like, advanced AI and AGI in terms of where they go with it in their mind. So I think what you've described in terms of future capabilities and some of the kind of the trade-offs that systems will make, I think that makes a lot of sense. The fork in the road where I think a lot of people go different ways is this question, I would say, of agency. We know a calculator doesn't really have agency in any meaningful sense. But there's a question of, as you build more and more capable systems, and especially more generally capable systems, do they develop agency, or will some people give them agency as well? Because there are people doing all kinds of things. And by agency, we mean kind of goal-seeking behavior, that they're given a goal. Maybe goal-seeking behavior is not quite enough. So goal-seeking behavior in a way where they navigate through the world, kind of respond to the environment, and do so at some points potentially counter to the operator's desires or society's broader desires. And that's where kind of people go in two different ways. People go, I can't imagine that, or it can't happen for ABC reasons. And others go, well, it's a logical consequence. If you have something really capable that really wants to achieve some outcome, then it will do so with or without your kind of support. So I guess very curious about your take on this possibility of agency in generally capable more advanced systems, and kind of how you feel about this.
Yeah, and I think this is where the alignment comes in as a factor. Look, the vast majority of AI systems at the moment, I mean, they have the goal of being able to perform the tasks that they've been designed to task, whatever that is. So respond to your question with some text that is in some way reasonable, for instance, or successfully navigate your path from where you are to where you want to go with the least amount of traffic interruptions, or whatever. Now, these single-dimensional goals are reasonably easy for us to understand, and I think they're not particularly difficult for people to understand that this program is just trying to answer this question. And it's, I guess, once the agency or the goal is a little bit less obviously defined, is the problem. But even within these single dimensional ones, we've certainly been looking, I guess, at the potential that alignment is wrong. I'll use an example from society. We've already done this in the way we design society, and we've identified the alignment problem before. So if you look at capitalism is aligned to a single goal of making money. The whole point of capitalism is that if everybody in society is trying to make as much money as they can, then you get a system that operates well in whatever way. And look, for a lot of the time, it does operate well. But there are certainly points through history when it's become unaligned to society. For instance, slavery. So the American slave trade was clearly based on trying to maximize money. If we can pay a small amount of money to pick up a workforce in Africa, a lot of the people that were investing in companies that were doing slavery may not have even known that those companies were doing slavery. So the capitalist system brought out features that isn't what society wanted.
Yep.
Society fixes this by putting restrictions on that single goal. And those restrictions are rules around not doing slavery. More recently, we have the same sort of thing. Capitalism keeps producing more and more greenhouse gases. There is very little built into the capitalist system to stop that from happening, unless doing something that doesn't release greenhouse gases is cheaper. You're not going to stop it, which is why they tried to bring in things like carbon credits and so forth. They're trying to bring in alternative goals so that it no longer, apart from the standard capitalistic goal, so that we can better align it to what society needs. So these alignment problems also occur in AI. So if we set up an AI to be able to, there's a famous example that's often discussed in the literature around the making of paper clips, and your listeners will
got a little paper clip in my hand I'm playing with. Perfect timing.
So there is a paperclip game that you can play online, but essentially the whole idea is you act as an agent trying to make as many paperclips as possible. But if you give the system access to the world, so not just the factory, but they can actually access the world, then they might use those profits to buy other factories to make more paperclips, and similarly get more mines and so forth. And eventually you can build a system. The system might become so good at what it's done that all you've got left in the world is a lot of paperclips.
Right.
Now, and so the whole idea in the alignment is to be able to have the agent identify this. A lot of my research work has been more recently has been around this alignment problem. That is, the problem is it's very hard for humans to identify the goals. When we're giving an agent a goal, it's very easy for us to say, win the game of chess or do X or whatever it is we want it to do. And we give it one goal. But we don't want it to go beyond what we've asked it to do. If you can get a runaway situation if that does occur. And so I guess controlling that alignment. So a lot of our work has been trying to set up systems so that it can learn for itself to not cause impacts beyond what it should be doing to achieve the task that it was asked to do. So not do things beyond what it was asked to do. And that's why we've sort of been looking. But this is systems trying to learn it. the other way is to have people actually say, no, don't do that in some way. But that tends to be done after the event, after we've realized there's a problem.
Right.
Nobody thought when releasing blockchain, this is where humans go wrong. So they release Bitcoin with using blockchain and everything looks all hunky-dory until years and years later on, they start to see the amount of processing power that's needed to be able to process Bitcoin. And then they start to see the problem. It's very hard at that point to come back in and put restrictions on the system. And I think this is where we need to be concerned now, is it's much easier to try and get the restrictions on these systems put in now rather than waiting until we find there's restrictions needed and trying to put them in afterwards.
Yeah, and I think that firstly, this is a fantastic kind of description of a lot of the challenges. I think the analogy with capitalism is a great one, and I think it's a great one for a couple of reasons. One is exactly what you described. Simple goal, maximize profit, leading to kind of poor outcomes. And also, capitalism has also given us things like the corporation and bottom up large markets, which are actually a form of kind of super intelligence in a sense.
Yes.
Like, at least compared to a single individual, these much bigger groups of people and cohorts are much more intelligent and capable. And sometimes you look at how for example, a corporation is operating, and it almost looks like, and I think it is the case, that no individual is actually running the show there, right? It is.
That's right.
There's a whole group of people, and they're all aligned around making money and returning shareholder profits, and it takes that can lead to really terrible outcomes, and it takes really strong measures and really slow kind of coordination mechanisms often to kind of stop their problematic aspects. So I think it's a really apt analogy, and one we can learn a lot from.
It's probably also a really good example of where the problems are going to be with emerging AGI, in the sense that once you get a large AGI that's operating across a large decision area, it's not that it in itself is taking over the world as such or wiping out humanity. It's more that if it's not aligned, if that corporation is not doing what we want, it's really hard for individuals to be able to address or change what that corporation is doing.
Right.
You can only change it if there is sufficient mass of people that are opposed to it, that you can cancel culture it or whatever it is that you want to do to try and stop that company from operating in that way. And with an AGI, I don't know if you could do cancel culture, but there's that AGI would be operated by a company, so you'd still be having to operate against the company as a mass population movement against the company operating the AGI, or government, or whoever's operating.
Yeah. And a good example of something like that, I think we've seen, is things like social media. We set up really simple optimization of maximize views, maximize eyeballs on screen, and maximize ad dollars. And all of a sudden, negativity bias, putting things in the newsfeed that are highly negative, which maybe individually in that situation it's not that big of a problem, but collectively it's causing all kinds of kind of real problems for people's mental health and societal disruption. And only now are we trying to get governments and large collectives of people to try and respond and set some rules about that.
Yeah, and I think, and this is where I think a lot of my concerns lay, is my concerns are not massively around a fear of AGI as such. It's the way society will take it on board and use it. And I think this is where there are real risks, more than I don't accept the AI taking over the world like in iRobot or whatever particularly, but what I do fear, I guess, is the effect if very simple algorithms such as the TikTok algorithms and so forth, these very simple recommendation algorithms can so drastically shift people's ideological understandings of the world and their view of the world, and actually move people's view of the world in a particular way. And if that AI has, there's not necessarily anything malicious in the algorithms that TikTok or Twitter or whatever are using. Imagine if somebody actually created one with the point of trying to nudge you in a particular direction. And we do talk about nudging people. So, and in the book Life 3.0, they even talk about how they can change this AI could be created to be able to change people's opinions by nudging them. They personalizing the information that they get, nudging them but towards whatever the goal of the system might be. Now, they're more possible things than AI taking over the world. And this is more about how, I guess, people use AI or use systems that are built on AI. A lot of AI developers are certainly much more aware of this, and there is a lot more active discussion and development in systems that can, I guess, keep more of a diversity of opinion. And this is in their audience. So not trying to nudge people towards a particular thing. In the case of a lot of these recommendation systems, they're just trying to maximize clicks. So they've got a simple rule, but that simple rule doesn't align with all of society. And the ultimate aim is to get all the clicks. If they've got all the clicks, then they've got nothing. They've won. They've got everybody clicking everything that they want. And so they want to maximize that. But I think we need to, there are algorithms that are developed that can avoid some of this. I think, I don't know why any company would want to deploy a recommendation system, for instance, that doesn't maximize clicks. So I think to some extent, this is where governments need to step in. There needs to be someone deciding how society wants to use these systems, how we want these systems incorporated. And I guess up until recently, that conversation hasn't been happening. These letters and so forth coming out from like the Elon Musk letter, not that it was Elon Musk's letter, but anyway, the one called the Elon Musk letter.
Yes, popularly known as.
Yes. It was actually, I won't name who I believe wrote it because it's not actually publicly stated anyway, but I believe it's from, it's just that Elon Musk was one of the early signatories to it. So the other corporation one, a lot of these letters are really just trying to highlight what we need. My view is they're trying to highlight is that we need to have a conversation in society. What I don't think people want is people such as myself, a technologist, deciding what needs to happen, because that's the source of the problem. I have a view about what should be done, but my view shouldn't be more important than the rest of society. And what we need is a societal conversation about how we want these systems to affect us and how we want to take them on board, and whether or not we want companies to build into their systems, let's say, a no nudging policy where they're not trying to nudge people, or they're actively trying to, if you work out that somebody's ideological position is X, you don't only present things within that X view, that you provide things with some sort of broad appeal across ways. But companies aren't going to decide to do this themselves.
Yes, yes. So I think this is a great segue into speaking more generally to how, as a society, we should be responding to this kind of era of more advanced AI systems. You've touched on regulations that restrict what private companies are and aren't allowed to do, and you've touched on ensuring that those rules come from a broad-based consensus from across society, not just from the technology sector. Are there other things you think we should be doing as a society in preparation for a world with, significantly more capable AI systems than that exist today?
So broadly speaking, I actually quite like a list released by the Future of Life Institute. So Future of Life Institute released a policy making in the pause paper, which is worth having a look at. And look, what that document talks about is that they actually set out, I think it's 7 recommendations. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yep, 7 recommendations of things that we should be looking at. Things around robust third-party auditing. So having methods of certification and auditing of AI systems. Obviously, the development of what is required as part of that certification and that auditing process is something that needs to be the result of a conversation with everybody, everybody with an interest in this. We need to be able to regulate organizations around things like computational power, because one of the concerns would be if the system has the ability to utilize however much computation that we want, with all these cloud services, one of the fears would be that an AI would be able to just access and increase its computation just by accessing additional cloud services, and thereby increasing its power. So do we want to limit the amount of computation that these systems can have? Liability for AI causing harm. So who's actually liable for a system that gets something wrong?
Adding to the cost side of the ledger for these companies, at least.
That's
so there's some cost to bad actions.
Yeah, so there's a whole group of people in law that are looking at how we actually establish, I guess, legal rules around how we actually handle these things. Measures to be able to prevent or track AI model leaks. We've seen with a lot of the GPT type stuff, there's been lots of model leaks for a lot of these systems.
Yep.
Once those models are leaked, how do we then control those? They might be leaked at a different point. You can also shift these models. So there's a lot of techniques around now for these large language models where you can change, sort of push them towards different viewpoints and different arguments, be able to provide different answers to what the existing systems would. And so how we sort of regulate around that. AI safety research. So a lot of my work is in autonomous agent safety, which is a bit different to things like ChatGPT and so forth, but which is more related to robots. So robots and other agent-based systems, and having them operate safely when they're in a human shared environment, so that they not only are optimizing the result for their human. So if you think of, say, personal assistants or so forth, they're obviously trying to do the right thing by their person, but they can't be treading on other people in the process. You can't just be using other people in the process. And yeah, look, standards for identifying and managing AI and so forth. And I think a lot of this has been coming from the AI community, because we've kind of reached the point where we can develop algorithms to do certain things, but how those algorithms are going to be used, we don't necessarily control that. And I guess for me, I get nervous about creating algorithms that I can't actually control how they're going to be used,
right?
Because there's no framework for them to be operating within safely.
Yes. technology is dual use. They have good and bad ends, and if you're completely, unregulated on the bad ends, or there's limited safeguards on the bad ends at a societal
Yeah,
level, then inventing something is risky.
yeah. And if we go back to the capitalism and corporate um, example earlier, there's an entire field of law around corporate law. You can
Mm,
become a specialist in corporate law and as a lawyer, the whole degree and profession around corporate law. So where is the same profession around AI law? And
yeah,
frankly, it's going to be at least as big as corporate law would be.
yeah.
Um,
I certainly hope so, and I certainly hope we have, technologists who understand the societal and policy implications, and
mm,
lawyers and policymakers who understand the technology. That's how we're going to come up with the best ideas to how to control these systems.
mm, mm. Yeah, so I think there is a lot of work, and I mean, AI people have sort of been saying it for a while, kind of been ignored by governments until recently. Um, but there's an urgent need now for us to, I guess, improve this, and it needs to be kept up to date. So, for instance, Australia brought in a AI ethics policy,
Mm,
and I was thinking this was quite recently, and I was talking to a PhD student, and they said, this was, I think I'm going from memory now, but I think it was 2019.
right.
Sudden realization that was 4 years ago. We didn't
Mm,
have GPT 4 years ago. We didn't
right.
have almost any of the stuff that we've got now.
Right.
So something that actually feels like it was reasonably recent is actually already old. The
Yes.
European laws on how to handle data and explainability and so forth came out before that. So it's like 5 years old, I think, 5 or
Right.
6 years old.
And
So
by legal standards, 4 years, 5 years, these are actually quite new laws. We have
it,
we
it,
have
it
other
is.
laws that have been sitting on the books for decades.
It is. And I think this is one of the problems is that we're moving much faster than human society, human legal systems are capable of keeping up. Um, and that's where there is, even just to get a conversation, it's what, 6 months since the Musk letter, nearly 6 months, 4 months
Mm,
since the Musk letter. It's November, 7, 8 months since ChatGPT came out.
mm,
Yet we're still not developing any standards. At a university
yes.
level, we start meeting in January around what are we going to do about ChatGPT. Well, we're still discussing it, and a whole semester's gone by, and so
Yes. Yes.
um, we've got to rewrite laws on plagiarism within universities. We've got to change the way we teach within universities to factor these AI systems in. Um, so it's the fact that society is so slow to move that I think is a bigger problem.
Yes.
Um,
Definitely true. Definitely
and that
true.
that was really the essence behind the Musk letter, which I should call the pause letter. What it was asking was, can we pause development because we need to get our structures in society to keep up. Of course, it was
Yeah.
ignored, and the industries are still
Yes.
developing them, but um, I
But
don't think
it got the
anybody expected
conversation going.
it. Got the
Yeah.
conversation. That was more the point.
On this front, one of the ideas, obviously this is a very hard problem and no one thing will solve it. But one of the ideas I like better than others is this idea that countries and on an international level as well, we should start to have dedicated, specialized regulators who really keep up with the technology. The idea of an AI commission or
Yeah,
an office of AI or similar, where just like we do in cybersecurity or foreign policy, we don't try and spin up on foreign policy every time we have a new incident happen. We've had people who've worked in that field for decades who've learned both the societal needs and the practical problems who can respond quickly and effectively. What are your thoughts on this idea of kind of like a specialized regulator in places like Australia, the US, and around the world?
Look, I certainly think that it's the only way forward is to have a model that can operate. There are some difficulties in it, in that any AI is going to operate globally. So national level regulation does not stop people releasing stuff within a unregulated country and then being able to use it there. So I think there is some, and that's sort of aligns with all of the problems in this, is that we've got these are global entities. They're going to be operating across the globe in a whole range of things. And we need to, I would like to see an international set of standards that the UN and all the countries sign up to. It may be that how that's handled within a country might be need regulation as well. But I would also like to see something that's at the international level as well. That just an accepted standard. We still don't have any sort of accepted standards of what's to be done. And without that, then we have no way of ensuring that it's done safely across all areas. And to be honest, it just comes to mind is that we've got a number of countries that I think are probably more capable of taking up AI than, say, Australia or the US. So Australia is, for instance, very concerned about data privacy, as a number of Western countries can be. But AI kind of needs access to the data to be able to operate. And so to some extent, we may also be falling behind because we don't have access to the data. So some of the algorithms may even fall behind because it's harder to get access to the data. So that whole competition in AI development might drive AI development in the West to have to use data before society is ready for us to be able to use that data. So,
yeah, the whole international competition aspect is definitely another whole big aspect of these things. So,
but I certainly think in the short term, a national level body, they've got to be able to keep up with the technology. But they need to also be integrated into our systems. So having a body that says, "Oh, no, people shouldn't be doing this or they should be doing that," is all well and good. But if they've got no actual power to incorporate that into our legal systems, then there's nobody actually holding them to account. So
yes, absolutely. The actual teeth of any regulator are incredibly important and ability to affect change. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about what are the specific areas of work that you're tackling in this field, and how do you think they may contribute to a more positive future with AI systems?
Okay. So about 5 years ago, up until 5 years ago, we'd been working exclusively in an area, well, not exclusively, but primarily in an area around multi-objective reinforcement learning. Reinforcement learning is particularly systems that, I guess, learn to achieve a particular goal, whereas multi-objective looks at not only achieving that goal, but learning to potentially have alternative objectives that might limit its desire to achieve that goal. So, yes, I'll get you to that point as fast as possible, but I won't break any laws or take any risks that might cause an accident or anything. So there's certain restrictions. in that simple example. So we've been working on that and looking at techniques for doing that. About 5-6 years ago, we started to look at the alignment problem and other areas around human alignment in general. So looking at safe RL, looking at ethical systems, methods for, I guess, interacting with people and getting their personal views about an agent's behavior, as well as explainability. So ensuring that a system is accountable, if you like, for what it's doing. And I think some of the work that, if we take, say, explainability, some of the work we've been doing has been around, let's move away from what is commonly called transparent AI. So methods that I tend to think more along more debugging AI. So when they say transparent, it's really transparent to the engineers that developed it. It's not particularly transparent to the general public. And so I was particularly interested in explainability for the general public. So systems that go beyond just, I said cat because this part of the image looks a bit like a cat. And so I was more interested in, I guess, the reasoning behind it. So the reasoning behind a decision that was made. So if we're looking at autonomous agents, and primarily within autonomous agents, so looking in autonomous agents, not only I did this action because it was the most optimal, but I did this action because my internal reason, my internal goal was X, or whatever the goal was. Why it decided that that was its goal, if assuming it's got multiple potential goals and it wasn't created for one goal. So why is it choosing that goal? What other objectives affected the decision? So for instance, perhaps if there's other people or things in the environment, how did being considerate of those other people affect my decision? So I stopped because I saw this person coming, so I wanted to stay out of their way, sort of thing. So trying to incorporate these higher level reasoning components into that explanation and to present those in a way that was easier for the person to understand. So this was via a sort of conversational approach to explainability. So starting broadly, you provide sort of broad explanations, but if they want more details, you can drill down and provide more details about the reason for the decision. And so that was sort of some of my work in explainability. We've also been looking at the alignment problem directly. So how does an agent learn not to do certain things without me having to tell it? So if you've asked an agent to tidy up a room, it's going to and it's got some definition of what rubbish is in the room. So anything sitting on the floor that's paper or plastic or whatever, it's going to pick up. So it's going to go around the room in a standard learning agent. It's just going to go around the room and pick up all the rubbish. And if in doing so, it's got to move the furniture or close doors or open doors or whatever, that's just what it's got to do to pick up the rubbish.
Right.
But all of those things, moving furniture and so forth, might not be what people want. We want you to pick up the rubbish, but I don't want you to move my table because on the table there's a vase, you'll break the vase, which will then see as rubbish. You'll get more reward for breaking the vase because breaking the vase gives it more rubbish and gets more reward
more
because it broke the vase.
Yeah, so you can see how this could go awry.
Yeah, so it's got the potential of, if we simply say you get a reward for picking up rubbish, it's potentially could just turn everything into being rubbish. So how do we stop it from doing that without us explicitly beforehand realizing all the things that could go wrong? And believe me, that is almost an impossible problem. So as a human, I'll relate this for your audience. If anybody's had children, right?
Okay.
And that you bring those children into the house, or you bring young children into the house, young toddlers, and you release them. We talk about baby-proofing a house. Now, anybody that's
Right.
baby-proofed a house knows that there's things you miss, right? Doesn't
Right.
matter how careful you are, you miss that corner, you miss that PowerPoint, or you miss that they could trip over that cord or whatever it is. So there are always things that you miss. You can't get everything. Um, just as a side, I think we just recently got a dog. Baby proofing is easier than dog proofing,
Oh,
because
interesting.
baby proofing they start in a small area because they don't move very much when they're crawling and
Right,
so
right, right,
forth.
right. But
So
dogs,
it
on the
takes
other
them
hand.
longer to get somewhere, and you sort of have weeks and months before they start really running around. Whereas with a dog, it's running
Uh,
around from day one, and it's a total nightmare. We just got one 18 months ago, so it took us a long time to dog proof the house. But it's the same with an agent. We need to, it's very hard to go around and say, this thing here, I don't want you to touch that, I don't want you to touch that, etc. So what we wanted was a system that could learn for itself the things that it shouldn't touch. And so this just used something called impact minimization, which was to um, essentially, it's told what rubbish is, and it assumes that everything else it shouldn't change. Okay. What the agent was then able to go and learn to do was it still moved the furniture to access the rubbish, but it actually learnt to put the furniture back to exactly where it was before.
hmm, interesting.
So it undoes what it
Under the
did.
impact. Yeah.
And with the vase example, it knows not to break the vase because it can't put it back. Once it's broken, it
Right. If
can't
it's
put the
if it's
vase back.
careful enough to know that. Yeah. Okay.
So it learns
Yeah.
to be careful of the vase. It learns to put the furniture back and learn not to damaging. Of
Hmm.
course, where there's problem, then the next stage of this work is then we realize, well, hang on, what if a person comes in and moves the furniture? The agent will go, hang on, that's not where it's supposed to be, and go and move it back.
You got to stop that,
So there's
human.
always a next level. Now it's got to.
Sure,
So our
sure,
current
sure,
work
sure.
is looking at causality. So did the agent cause it to move, or did somebody else? So
Fascinating.
only moving the furniture back if it believes it's the one that moved it in the first place. So there's always sort of higher levels to each of these things, but that's sort of the work that we've been looking at.
Fantastic. Oh, yeah, a couple of things about that. Firstly, it's so clear to me that, areas like explainability and multi-objective worlds and impact minimization, how critical these things are going to be in ensuring that we create that safe and positive future. So that's
Mm.
fantastic, and we'll definitely put your contact details in the show notes. Richard, so that people who are listening who are interested in this work can reach out to you. But it also just makes me really excited and happy to hear this work happening. This is the
Mm.
work we need to be doing. These problems are hard, and so we want the safety and control aspects of AI to be moving along just as fast, if ideally even faster than the capabilities and the deployment of these systems. So, really exciting to hear the work that you're doing, and it sounds incredibly relevant to what we're talking about.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, no, well, it'd be great to hear from people that are interested in any of the work that we're doing. Um, yeah.
Fantastic. What are your kind of parting comments or thoughts for all of our listeners out there? Many of them technical folk, some from different backgrounds who care about creating a positive future with artificial general intelligence and similarly advanced systems. What are some of your parting thoughts? What would you encourage them to do, consume, read?
Um, sorry, to read.
Well, yeah, it can either be things that they should to do or things that they should look into.
Um, well, I think the main one is not to fear. I, I don't think there's anything to fear with the systems
Mm,
coming out. I think we need to understand them. AI does tend to go in little bursts. So, for instance, there was in the 70s, there was the symbolic methods boom. Then in the late 80s, you had neural networks. Each of these sort of, after a while, people start to realize that they're not as wonderful as we first thought. So if you look, for instance, at the early 2010s when deep learning first came out, deep learning came out, and everybody went wild about deep learning. AI was here. The news reports about deep learning was that it had been AI was here, like just like they're doing now.
Right.
And in the background, the researchers are all sort of going, yeah, it's really good at this particular niche problem here, but if I slightly tweak it like this, it doesn't work, right?
Right.
And these things were not robust to all problems in all situations. So yes, we can solve some things, we can't solve lots of things with these systems. So over the next decade, more than a decade and a half now, we've been playing around with these deep learning systems and finding out more about what they can't do and what they can do, and slightly improving them here and there to do certain things. But there's sort of a long pause. So you get the big boom and then there's a long pause. The new one was this generative AI or diffusion methods, etc., which have all sort of come out of one particular branch of these neural network work, which have caused the latest boom. Now, they're very interesting, but that's just the latest boom. There's going to be a period now, there's already a lot of work being done going, well, GPT can't do this, can't do that, can't do simple maths, it can't do anything that's a very specific question. It can only answer very general questions.
Right.
There's still it's still a big step, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the next step is going to be just as big. It's not a smooth linear increase. It's sort of, we take a big step and then pause for a little while. Methods like GPT does open up a lot of possibilities. So there was a lot of work through the 90s and early 2000s to develop a general knowledge-based system. So it was called CYC. And it failed. It was basically decided that we couldn't hand code general knowledge. What it was seen that general knowledge was the thing that we needed to really boom AI, and that's why they were trying to develop it. But they found that programming that by people couldn't do it because it shifts. But what GPT does allow us is that is, to some extent, that general knowledge engine. So it's not so much the text that generates that I find fascinating. It's the fact that it potentially can provide that general knowledge that can support more specific systems. So, for instance, if I make a robot and tell it to go to the shop to buy something, and it starts walking down the road and it gets to the main road, what's it going to do? Now, if it hasn't been programmed with how to do it and hasn't experienced a main road before, it potentially could ask GPT, what do I do to cross this road? And GPT might say, well, first look left and then look right and then look left. And if there's no cars coming, then cross the road. Okay, so now it's got a course of action. It's kind of narrowed down the potential choices that it had, and it's now got something specific that it can do. So this general knowledge from GPT could potentially support other systems. So there will be those sorts of developments. But as far as what people can do, I guess, yeah, as I was saying, I wouldn't fear it, but I'd certainly be aware of how the systems work, not what the media says, because what the media says is pretty much over exaggerated with a lot of what it's actually saying. But look into how it's actually operating. and see have a look at the cultural systems that you live by and think about how that can affect the way that you live, for the positive or the negative, I guess, before you start taking it up. I would like to see more people pushing to get government to have a conversation. And look, the government is doing stuff. CSIRO have got a group set up that are specifically looking at how we manage the sort of responsible AI. It would be good for this to be a more national thing that actually involved community, because I'm not sure that's really happening. But yeah, I wouldn't want to leave it up to just people like me deciding. I work on developing the systems, but somebody needs to work out how those systems can be used, other than OpenAI or other companies.
Yeah, other than the people, who have the money or who built the technology.
Yeah.
I want to say that this has been a really fantastic kind of balanced view of a lot of the opportunities and challenges I think AI poses. And I think my own journey of kind of reading through a lot of these different things and talking to a lot of people has brought me to a lot of similar conclusions as yourself, in terms of recognizing potential risks, some much further out than others, recognizing that it's a lot more about understanding and navigating the challenges rather than being scared of them, or just stopping them entirely, or other kind of hyperbole, or that they're going to solve all our problems, any of these kind of extreme kind of views. So I really appreciate your very balanced take, and I think our listeners will as well. Thank you so much for coming onto the show and sharing so much, and for all the fantastic work you're doing to make our world safe and positive with AI.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Cool. Thank you, Richard.